The millionaire thought it would be just another ordinary day as he took his girlfriend to the hospital, until, in the corridor, time stopped. His ex-wife appeared with 2 babies in her arms, and the past breathed again before him. If you like emotional dramas, subscribe to the channel and comment now where you are listening from. Continuing. The New York morning unfolded with that characteristic rush of those with unmissable appointments. Edward Miller adjusted the knot of his tie in the rearview mirror of his black BMW, checking his watch once more. 42 years of a meticulously planned life where every minute was worth fortunes and every decision shaped empires. Beside him, Camilla finished touching up her lipstick, her 28 years radiating that polished beauty that perfectly matched the social events they frequented. St. Raphael's Hospital stood imposingly in the Upper East Side district, a symbol of medical excellence, where the corridors echoed whispers of those who could afford the best. Edward had insisted on accompanying Camilla to her preventive exams, not out of genuine concern, but because he knew such gestures fed the image of an attentive boyfriend he cultivated in the social pages of magazines. As she disappeared down the corridors towards the laboratory, Edward remained in the parking lot, taking the opportunity to get ahead on a video conference that would define the acquisition of a company upstate. The laptop screen reflected his concentrated expression, numbers dancing in spreadsheets that represented much more than figures to him. They were tangible proof of his absolute control over his own life. It was when he looked up that the world seemed to inexplicably slow down. Crossing the maternity ward courtyard, a familiar figure walked with steady steps, accompanied by a nurse. Edward's heart pounded even before his mind fully processed what he saw. Dr. Olivia Hayes, his ex-wife, carried 2 small bundles that stirred gently in her arms. Newborns. Edward's fingers froze on the keyboard. 7 years. It had been 7 years since they signed the divorce papers in that cold office, where every word sounded like a definitive sentence. 7 years since she left his life, taking with her dreams he never knew how to value. But now, seeing her there, something primitive and inexplicable took hold of his chest. Perhaps it was the way she held those children, with a delicacy he had never witnessed. Or perhaps it was the serene smile that illuminated her face, a smile he hadn't seen since the first months of their marriage, before his ambitions began to build walls between them. Edward impulsively closed his laptop and got out of the car. His steps echoed on the hospital's marble floor as he approached, his heart beating at an erratic rhythm he hadn't felt in decades. When he finally got close enough to see the children's tiny faces, a strange sensation hit him like a lightning bolt. Their eyes, those tiny eyes, carried something unmistakably familiar, the same shade of brown he saw in the mirror every day, the same serene expression his mother always said he inherited from his grandfather, the shape of their noses, delicate but determined, the way their lips curved even in sleep. Olivia noticed his presence even before he spoke. She turned slowly, and for an instant, time seemed to rewind. The same green eyes that had enchanted him in medical school, now filled with a maturity that hadn't existed before. Her brown hair was shorter, framing a face that had gained a deeper beauty with the years. "Edward, my God," she said, her voice choked with surprise. The nurse beside her caught the tension in the air and discreetly moved a few steps away. "Olivia," he replied, struggling to maintain his composure. They are." The words were lost in the dense air that formed between them. Edward looked at the children again, now with a clarity that frightened him. There was no doubt. Those small beings carried his features unmistakably. "They're twins," Olivia said, her voice firm but laden with suppressed emotion. "Shy Peter and Alice, they were born yesterday." Edward's world collapsed and rebuilt itself in a matter of seconds. Peter and Alice, his children he didn't even know existed. The businessman who made millionaire decisions without batting an eye found himself completely speechless, planless, out of control. "Olivia, they are," he began. But she interrupted him with a look that mixed sadness and determination. "Yes, Edward, they are your children." The confession echoed down the corridor like an echo refusing to die. Edward felt his legs go weak, his breathing difficult. His entire life had been built on solid foundations of planning and predictability. Children never entered the equation. Family had been a chapter he deliberately left behind when he signed the divorce papers. Why did you never tell me? The question came out in a whisper, laden with pain and disbelief. Olivia took a deep breath, adjusting the babies in her arms. Because you made it very clear, throughout all our years together, that children were not part of your plans. You said they compromised freedom, that they were an obstacle to success. I discovered the pregnancy 2 weeks after the papers were signed, and I decided they deserved a father who truly wanted them, not someone who would see them as an obligation. Every word was a precise stab at truths Edward preferred not to see. He had indeed said those things. He had indeed believed that children were incompatible with the life he wanted to build. But now, looking at Peter and Alice, all that cold logic seemed absurd and cruel. Olivia, I want to know them. I want to be part of their lives. She studied him for long seconds, as if trying to decipher if those words came from the heart, or just a momentary impulse. You have a life, Edward, a girlfriend, a routine that doesn't include waking up in the middle of the night with a baby crying or giving up business trips to take a child to the pediatrician. I can change, he said, his voice firmer now. I need to change. Olivia shook her head gently. Change isn't something you decide overnight, Edward. It's a process, and these children need stability, not someone who might give up when they discover that parenthood is much harder than they imagined. Silence settled between them, heavy with unfulfilled promises and dreams that had taken different paths. Edward looked at the babies once more, and something in his chest moved in a way he had never experienced. It wasn't love yet. It was something more primitive, an inexplicable need to protect, to be present, and to be part of those tiny lives that carried his genetic and emotional heritage. Then give me a chance to prove it, he finally said. I'll start the paternity recognition process. Legally, I have rights. Olivia's face hardened. And I have the right to protect them from someone who might hurt them emotionally. Legal rights are one thing, Edward. Truly being present is another entirely different thing. Edward felt frustration grow in his chest, but also a determination he didn't recognize in himself. For the first time in his life, he was fighting for something he couldn't buy, control, or negotiate. He was fighting for a chance to be a father. At that moment, Camilla appeared in the corridor, looking for him with her eyes. When she finally located him, her face lit up with a smile that quickly faded as she noticed the scene. Edward, talking intensely with a woman holding 2 babies. The tension in the air was palpable even from a distance. Edward, are your appointments finished? Camilla asked, approaching with cautious steps. He looked at her as if seeing her for the first time. Camilla, with her impeccable beauty and her life organized around social events and romantic trips. How to explain that in a matter of minutes? The entire future they had planned together had just crumbled. Camilla, I need to talk to you, he said, his voice strangely formal. Olivia took advantage of the tense moment to say goodbye. Edward, I'm going home now. The babies need to rest. If you truly want to be part of their lives, you'll have to prove it with actions, not with words. She walked away, leaving behind a trace of soft perfume and the feeling that Edward's life had been divided into 2 distinct parts, before and after that encounter. Camilla watched him with a growing expression of confusion. Who was that woman, Edward? And why do you look like you've seen a ghost? Edward took a deep breath, knowing that the next words would change everything between them. That was my ex-wife, Olivia, and those were my children I didn't know existed. The silence that followed was deafening. Camilla blinked several times, as if processing information that made no sense. Your children? But how? When? It's a long story, Edward said. But now I need to figure out how to be their father. At that moment, as Camilla looked at him with a mixture of shock and incomprehension, Edward knew that his life had taken an irreversible turn. There was no going back. There was no negotiation. For the first time in 42 years, he was about to embark on a journey he couldn't control, predict, or master. And for the first time in his life, it didn't scare him. On the contrary, it awakened in him an urgency he had never felt before. The following 3 months were the most intense and unsettling of Edward's life. What began as an emotional impulse at the hospital transformed into a journey of painful discoveries and profound changes he never imagined himself capable of making. The legal process of paternity recognition went smoothly. The DNA test only confirmed what anyone's eyes could identify. Peter and Alice were his children, but gaining the legal right to visit them was just the first step of a mountain that seemed insurmountable. Camilla couldn't cope with the new reality. The first few weeks were marked by attempts at understanding, tense conversations, where she tried to find a place in that situation that made no sense in her carefully planned life. When Edward started cancelling executive dinners to be with the babies, when he began coming home with formula powder on his suit shoulders and dark circles under his eyes from learning to change diapers in the middle of the night, she realized she had lost the man she had fallen in love with. The separation happened on a rainy Tuesday, without drama, just with the melancholy of two worlds that discovered they were incompatible. Camilla packed her bags with the dignity of someone who understands that some changes are bigger than love. Edward didn't even try to convince her to stay. For the first time in his life, his priority was elsewhere. Olivia, for her part, watched his every move with the skepticism of someone who had been disappointed before. In their first meetings, Edward arrived punctually at her apartment in Greenwich Village, wearing impeccable suits that contrasted with the organized chaos of a house with babies. He held Peter and Alice with the exaggerated care of someone afraid of breaking something precious, his movements stiff and calculated. "You don't have to treat them like they're porcelain," Olivia would say, observing him during his first attempts to give a bottle. "They're your children, Edward. They won't break." But Edward had spent 42 years believing that children were an unknown and dangerous territory. Every cry sent him into a panic. Every night, fever made him call Olivia in the middle of the night asking for guidance. Slowly, however, something began to change. The first major transformation happened on a Friday night. Edward was with the twins in his apartment, a routine Olivia had reluctantly authorized. Alice woke up crying at 2 in the morning, and for the first time, Edward didn't call for help. He picked her up, walked through the dark living room whispering words he didn't even know he knew until she calmed down in his arms. At that moment, feeling the small warm weight of his daughter against his chest, Edward understood that all the money in the world couldn't buy that feeling. It was as if a part of him that had always been dormant had finally awakened. The changes accelerated. Edward started leaving the office earlier, delegating responsibilities he once considered untransferable. He learned to make bottles in the middle of the night, to identify the different types of baby cries, to sing lullabies his own mother sang to him decades ago. Olivia observed these transformations with increasing surprise. The man who once said children compromised freedom now carried the twins everywhere, proud to show photos to anyone who showed interest. During pediatric consultations, he took detailed notes, asked questions about child development that impressed even the doctors. It was during one of these consultations that Olivia received the call that would change everything again. Miami General Hospital offered her the coordination of the new pediatric neurology department, a pioneering project that represented the pinnacle of her medical career. The proposal was irresistible, both professionally and financially. When she told Edward, leaving the doctor's office, he stopped walking in the middle of the sidewalk. The children slept peacefully in the double stroller he had learned to handle with skill. "Miami." His voice carried an incredulity that bordered on despair. "It's a unique opportunity, Edward. A project that can revolutionize pediatric neurology treatment in the Southeast." "But what about the children and me?" The words came out louder than he intended, attracting the attention of passing pedestrians. Olivia looked at him firmly. "The children will come with me, naturally. And you have your life here, your businesses, your company." Edward felt anger grow in his chest, a revolt against yet another decision made without him. For a moment, he thought of threatening with legal action, of using all his financial power to prevent the move. But then he looked at Peter and Alice, who slept oblivious to the storm brewing over their heads, and something different pulsed in his heart. That night, alone in his apartment, Edward made the most important decision of his life. He called his senior partner and announced that he was expanding the company to Miami. It wasn't a complete lie. There were indeed business opportunities in Florida that he had been studying for months. But the truth was that he was willing to leave behind everything he had built in New York City to not lose the chance to watch his children grow up. The move happened in 2 months. Edward sold his apartment in the Upper West Side, transferred a significant part of his operations to the southeast, and settled in a condominium near the neighborhood where Olivia had rented a house. Not too close to seem like stalking, but close enough to be present whenever the children needed him. Olivia was genuinely impressed by the decision. For the first time since their reunion at the hospital, she allowed her guard to drop a little. "Miami is being good for them," she said on a sunny afternoon, as they watched Peter and Alice play in the park near her house. "And for me too," Edward replied, genuinely surprised by his own statement. The routine in Miami was completely different from the life he led in New York City. Mornings began with shared breakfast at Olivia's house, when her medical appointments allowed. Edward learned to take the children to daycare, to pick them up from baby swimming lessons, to improvise recipes when Alice rejected a certain baby food. Olivia, in turn, began to see a version of him she didn't know. The man who once considered work his sole purpose in life now cancelled meetings to not miss the children's first ocean swim. The inflexible executive patiently learned to assemble two-piece puzzles and celebrated every small achievement of his children as if they were Olympic victories. There wasn't a specific moment when they reconciled. The reconciliation happened gradually, in small and significant gestures, Edward leaving loving notes in the children's lunchboxes, Olivia keeping his favorite brand of soda in the fridge, the two sharing laughs when Peter said his first word, which was neither mommy nor daddy, but water, during one of the bathtub baths that had become a family ritual. The emotional climax of Edward's journey happened on a Sunday afternoon, 7 months after the move to Miami. He was in Olivia's backyard, helping to set up an inflatable pool for the children. Alice, who had just turned 8 months, crawled across the grass with the determination of an explorer on a mission. Edward was concentrating on the air pump when he felt 2 small hands rest on his leg. He looked down and saw Alice, standing for the first time, using him for support. Her brown eyes sparkled with pride at the achievement, and then, clear as crystal water, she pronounced the word that changed everything. "Papa." The world stopped. Edward felt his eyes fill with tears as he bent down to pick up his daughter. "Papa," she repeated, smiling in that way that melted all resistance. Olivia, watching the scene from the porch, felt her own heart tighten. At that moment, seeing Edward hug Alice with all the tenderness a father can have, she knew she had made the right decision in giving him a second chance. The word "Papa" became music in Edward's ears. Peter soon learned it too, and the two twins began to call him that with the naturalness of those who had never known another reality. For them, Papa had always been there, present, loving, available. In the months that followed, Edward and Olivia found a balance that neither of them had experienced before. They were no longer husband and wife, but something perhaps even more solid. Partners in raising 2 lives that depended on them to discover the world. They shared responsibilities naturally. Edward took the children to the pediatrician on Wednesdays. Olivia stayed with them on the weekends he traveled for work. During sleepless nights caused by fevers or childhood nightmares, they took turns without discussion, united by a purpose greater than any personal difference. The Edward who once despised the idea of waking up in the middle of the night because of a child's cry now considered those moments the most precious of his life. When he held Peter or Alice in his arms during the Miami nights, whispering invented stories or simply enjoying the quiet breathing of the little ones, he felt a fullness that no professional achievement had ever provided. The fortune he had built in New York City continued to grow, but now it had a different purpose. It was no longer a symbol of power or freedom, but a tool to ensure that Peter and Alice had every opportunity the world could offer. Freedom, a value he once considered supreme, redefined itself as the conscious choice to be where one is most needed and loved. On a December afternoon, as the 3 walked along South Beach, Peter tripped in the sand and cried. Edward picked him up, comforting him with the patience of someone who learned that love is measured in presence, not in presence. Olivia watched the scene with a smile that carried memories of the past and hopes for the future. "You found your true calling," she said, when Peter stopped crying and went back to playing in the sand. Edward looked at his children, then at her. "I found much more than that. I found who I truly am." On that golden late afternoon in Miami, Edward Miller understood that time can heal, bring closer, and transform. The man who once vehemently rejected the idea of forming a family discovered that in the chaos of bottles, in the sleepless nights, and in the small daily achievements resided the true meaning of success. He had not only found his children, he had found himself, and in this new identity of present father, dedicated partner, and man in constant reconstruction, he discovered that the greatest company he could lead was the family he had helped create. End of story. And so ends this journey of transformation and discovery. Dear listeners, Edward's story shows us that it's never too late to change, to discover new meanings for success, and to embrace love in its purest form. If this narrative touched your heart as we hope, leave your like, subscribe to our channel, and share in the comments which moment moved you the most. Every day we bring stories that reveal the transformative power of love and family, showing that sometimes life's greatest treasures arrive when we least expect them. Until the next episode, and remember, life always offers us a second chance to be who we were truly born to be.